Good morning, everyone. My name is Jim Piaski with Hock International, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to our webinar today, the CSCA Certification Insights and Comprehensive Review. As you know, CSCA stands for Certified in Strategy and Competitive Analysis, and today we have a great webinar for you talking about that certification and how it can help you grow. This time, we'll start the presentation, and I'll show you the agenda for today before we begin. But today's webinar in general will cover a lot of the things that you are asking yourself about, the questions that we have for today. We'll go through an introduction of the certification. We'll hear from some special guests that have taken the CSCA and can give you a testimonial about that experience. We'll talk about who the CSCA is for and if it's right for you, give you some tips and guides on how to prepare for that certification. Show you about the case studies and some different things that are on the exam, how to pass using some study tools, hear some of our friends and their review of taking it themselves and how that process went for them, and then answer some of the questions that you have after we show you the Hock materials. Know that today's presentation is being recorded and you will be provided a copy of the presentation. We'll send that to you after we finish up today. Chat is disabled, so if you've been on a webinar before, know that you cannot use the chat function to send messages to us or to each other. However, we will be putting some links and some information in that chat area for you to be able to access some information. And finally, today we do have the ability for you to ask questions. I do ask that you kind of look at the agenda that we have here today. Know that we will cover some of the more frequently asked questions. And so if you want to save your questions a little bit, we will have time at the end to answer all of your questions that you have. So when you do have a question, you can hit that Q&A button on your screen and type that in, and then we'll be able to reply to those as well. So without further ado, I would like to turn this over to our very first speaker, a very good friend of mine, Lisa Bowden, who is IMA's Senior Director of Business Development. She is also a CMA and CSCA, and it is my great pleasure to introduce Lisa Bowden at this time. So Lisa, welcome.
Thanks so much, Jim, and thank you for asking me to participate in this webinar. I appreciate the support. We at IMA appreciate the support of Hock International, promoting the CSCA and helping us to share details about its value with accounting and finance professionals around the world. One thing that will be presented later is that the CSCA is part of a suite of certifications that is offered by IMA, and we're really proud to have Hock International as a partner with us to deliver preparation materials for all of those certifications. And one thing I love about Hock webinars is all the love you feel with the emojis coming across the screen. So thank you to the wonderful viewer attendees today. But the CSCA is an advanced professional certification, and it's intended to be that next step after you've earned an advanced professional certification like the CMA, like the USCPA, like the chartered accountants from around the world, and other types of advanced professional certifications in the accounting and finance space. And it is sort of what I would almost consider like a capstone, because I think back to when I took my business, both undergraduate and graduate degrees in business administration, there was always a strategy class at the end. And it was where you were sort of pulling together all of these different things that you learned to think big picture about decisions to grow the organization, to move the organization in different ways, to be more impactful and to reach new markets, have new products and services, et cetera. And so this is really what the CSCA helps you to do. It helps you to reinforce or acquire those advanced strategic knowledge, skills, and abilities that can help you to think like a true business leader, a strategic business leader. So it is really that next step after a certification like the CMA or other professional certifications in the accounting and finance space. Now, in some cases, I hear, many of the people sitting for the CSCA have many years of work experience, like myself, like Nina, and One thing I wanted to mention though is we actually are in touch with a lot of our CSCA holders, and they're at all career stages. In fact, you would naturally think that it would be somebody who is further along in their career, right? Because we know that the natural career progression is that as you move up in your career, you're likely no longer closing the books, creating the budgets yourself, analyzing all of the results, but instead you're looking at the bigger picture. Where do we take this organization? So naturally, you would think that that is somebody further along in their career. However, I've met some CSCAs who pretty, at early stages of their careers or just in the first 5, 10 years or so. And they're telling me that it helps them to ask better questions when they're in the room with the leaders. And they're talking about maybe even operational things, but there's always a strategic impact of some of these operational decisions. I know one young man, just a few years out of school, and he earned the CSCA, and he said, I'm not really using it directly in my current job, but I volunteer on a nonprofit board, and I find that I'm able to really help with the strategic direction of that nonprofit organization because of my skill set. And so it's also really good for entrepreneurs. I know somebody who is a person working in a corporate environment as a CSCA, but her family owns a business, and she says, we have discussions at the dinner table every night, and I'm bringing my CSCA knowledge to talk about what direction we should take the family business in. So it has so much broad applicability, whether you are an advanced professional in accounting and finance who's further along in your career, but even at the early and middle stages, or if you're serving, a nonprofit organization or helping with a family business, there's just a lot of content that's really valuable and really relevant to driving business performance. I did want to say that for myself, I sat for the CSCA in 2017 when it was first launched. At that time, the CSCA was only available to people who already held the CMA. As of a year ago, it was expanded, and many people can now sit for the CSCA. They have to hold a recognized certification in accounting or finance. It's over 60 global certifications that you can hold in order to be eligible. But what I found personally of value with the CSCA is that, like I said earlier, I've taken strategy courses, I've read strategy books, I've attended webinars, so I have all this information about strategy, but I found that by preparing for this exam, going through the learning materials and then preparing for this exam, it really helped me to create a framework in my mind that I refer to regularly. And it really clarified a lot of the things that I had learned about strategy in different places, and help me have this model or framework in my mind so that when we're discussing a future business idea, an opportunity, and even when we're looking at current programs, I always stop and think, well, what's the goal of this program? What's the mission of this program itself? And are we meeting it? Are we not? Where's the gap? How do we get there and fill that? And then how do you measure it at the end? And that's that framework that is built in my mind now because of the CSCA. Despite the fact that I took, many courses through my college career and learned a lot about strategy since then, the CSCA helped to solidify my understanding of strategy and how these concepts can be applied in business to support the business, to grow the business and evaluate it and really meet strategic targets. So that's a little bit about IMAs, why we created this certification, who it's for, but also how it has impacted me personally and professionally. So thank you for allowing me to share that with you guys today. And we'll move on, I guess, Jim.
Great. Thank you so much, Lisa. Lisa and I have been colleagues together for so many years, and it's always great to hear about your experience. We really appreciate your time, Lisa, especially hearing how the CSCA has benefited you and how you use it in your current job. So thank you for all your support. We really appreciate that.
Thanks, Jim.
All right, at this time, we will move on with our agenda, and I'd like to introduce you to our main host today, and that is Mr. Brian Hock. So Brian is president and founder of Hock International. So over 20 years, he has been developing materials that help finance and accounting professionals to pass their exams. Over the past year, I've gotten to know Brian very well as we've traveled around the world and been able to share information about how the materials that we work with help those pass the exam. And Brian is a wonderful person to work with, and I'm excited to introduce him to be our speaker today. So Brian, thank you for joining us, and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Jim. Thank you, Lisa, for your time today and talking about CSCA from your standpoint. Welcome, everyone. I know it's a weekend, and I appreciate everyone's time for coming and learning about CSCA and how it is that we can help you become a CSCA. There's already been a question asked, was if I start now, will I be able to appear and pass the exam in the March window? And that's what we're going to talk about today. The short answer is yes. We'll obviously spend a little more time than just that for the rest of the presentation. But as Jim said, we're going to talk about CSCA, what it is, who it's for, and how we can make it realistic for you to take your exam and to pass your exam in March. But we'll start with what is CSCA. And I think it's important that we look at the name of this exam because there's a word in it that's unique, and that is strategy. This is Certified in Strategy and Competitive Analysis. And I've been involved with professional certifications for probably 30 years now. And as far as I know, this is the only certification that has the word strategy in it. There are a lot of certifications that cover strategy, that have some element of strategy within it. Strategic planning, perhaps, is probably the most common. And there's certifications, CMA, that have SWOT analysis and some of the things that deal with strategy. But this is the only certification that focuses on strategy. So we have strategy and competitive analysis. And competitive analysis is a big part of the strategy. Because if you don't know what's out there in the marketplace, you don't know what your competitors are doing or not doing or planning or thinking about, it makes it very hard to operate your own business and to be able to guide your business into the future. And so we often just kind of gloss over the name of the certification. But in this case, I think it's important to recognize that the focus of the certification is strategy. It's not something that is part of it. It's not something that's covered a little bit, but that is what this certification is focusing on, is strategy, competitive analysis, designing the strategy, implementing the strategy, measuring the success of the strategy, and all of that. So that then takes us to the question, who is CSCA for? And Lisa talked about this in the sense that it's actually for a lot of people. We look at it as a second certification because you already have to have one certification in order to even be eligible for CSCA. But I look at it this way. The higher up you go in an organization, the further into the future you're supposed to be looking. And if we just take the person that we hired last week, that's an accounts payable, their job is to pay the payables as they come due in the next week, the next month. It's a very short-term focus to their job. But as you get promoted up through that organization, you start looking further and further into the future. And so when you get to the CEO and the CFO and the directors in that level, yes, they know what's going on today, but that shouldn't be their focus, because that's why they hired the accounts payable person, the accounts receivable person, and the inventory manager to take care of what's happening today. So the higher up in the organization you go, the more strategic, the more forward-thinking you need to be in what you're doing. But it's hard to get that experience without having that position. And so as you're going up an organization, having CSCA is what gives you the tools to succeed when you get into that position. And it's also part of that interview process in terms of being able to demonstrate either within your own company in a promotion or moving to another company. It's part of that process to be able to demonstrate that you do have the tools necessary to be able to do the job. So this is something that is going to be part of that promotion process. And as Lisa commented, the person who's using the skills of CSCA, not in their work, but in a volunteer position, same thing. Any organization, any involvement you have, you're able to bring these skills and this to the work that you are doing. Lisa mentioned that IMA has a suite of certifications, FMAA, CMA, and CSCA. She didn't mention what they were. And this slide just kind of puts CSCA into a perspective, that larger scope of the certifications that IMA has. FMAA is that introductory foundation course, certification, accounting, finance. CMA, I'm guessing that a lot of you who are listening now are CMAs and you're familiar with that. And CSCA is the capstone not only to CMA, but as Lisa said, 60 other professional certifications where you have all of that technical knowledge, you have that accounting, you have that finance, you have that audit experience and knowledge. And CSCA just kind of puts that strategic element on top of it. It takes it and puts it out there, for people to see that you have this. We also need to keep in mind that when we're talking about strategy, it's not only accountants and finance people that need to have that strategic thinking and those skills related to strategy. Anybody who's in charge of a department, anybody who's in charge of part of an organization, in charge of a budget, there's a lot of strategy even within that part of the organization. And so this isn't just the CEOs and the CFOs that are looking at strategy, but accounting, finance, marketing, HR, there's all an element of how this strategic thinking goes into leading an organization successfully into the future. So I've already talked about this in terms of, will it help you get a promotion? Yes, absolutely. One of the things people kind of have a mindset or a question about with certifications is, will it happen automatically? If I get a certification, will I get a job? If I get this, will I get a promotion? No, there's no guarantee. You can have every accounting and finance certification in the world, but you still have to go to an interview and you still have to, demonstrate to the person you're interviewing with that you have those skills that the company's looking for. You're going to be able to do what it is that the company needs for that position. And you're going to be able to communicate. You're going to be able to work within the team. All of that, you still have to do in an interview. So will CSCA help you get a promotion? Absolutely. It will help you get the interview. It will help you get the opportunity. But nobody's going to hire you simply because you have a specific certification. If you go into the interview and you're rude and you don't communicate very well, they don't care how many certifications you have. If you're not able to communicate that knowledge, if you're not able to work within a team, nobody's going to want you in their team in that position. And so when you go into an interview and the person that you're interviewing asks you the question, what is CSCA? I'm not familiar with it. What is CSCA? Any certification. This is actually an opportunity for you to do two things. One is to help educate that person about what it is that you know and what it is that this certification has taught you. And it's also an opportunity for you to demonstrate your communication skills, for you to be able to provide this information, present this information to the person who's interviewing you in a coherent way, in a clear way, in a way that communicates the value of what it is that you know. That's a tremendous opportunity for you to not only show you know what the job needs, but you can communicate well. So much of jobs is communication. And if you can't communicate with other people in the organization, it's going to be a very difficult position for you. But when you're in that interview and you have that opportunity to talk to somebody about CSCA or whatever certification you have, that's an opportunity for you to not only demonstrate you have the skills, but you have the communication skills as well, which are absolutely important in whatever job it is that you're looking for, that you're interviewing for. So at this point, we've talked about what it is, and we've said that it's good for you and it's going to help you get a promotion. I'm going to kind of change gears a little bit and talk about how much does it cost. And I chose the picture that we have here because cost isn't really the right word. It fits nicely on the size of a slide, but really what we're looking at here is, what is the amount of investment you need to make? Because what you put into CSCA is going to provide a return. This isn't an investment like any certification for the rest of your career. And when we look at how much it costs, you'll see that the ROI for CSCA is spectacularly large. So there's two elements to the cost. You need to study for it and you need to take the exam. The study materials, and I'll talk more about them later. Right now it's $59 a month. And the exam is in March. So right now you're talking about 2 months of subscription. $118, if my math is correct. We have some special promotional prices available for the exam registration, and you'll register through Hock, and we'll take care of your registration and get all of that done with IMA. And the cost of the registration depends a little bit on when it is that you register. If you pay your registration before January 31st, it's $420. And you can see on the slide, it goes up a little bit more each time, each couple of weeks. So if you register for your exam before January 31st, that's $420 for the registration. Let's say $120 for materials. So you're $540 for the preparation and the exam fees for taking the exam. That's your investment. Now, there's some time, obviously, time to prepare and to pass the exam. But from a financial standpoint, the investment into CSCA is not huge. Okay, we recognize that the study process is not a long study process. And that's why we've set up the subscription to allow you to just need to access the materials for the time that you need it. And so this is what the investment is going to be financially for going into CSCA. Now, let's look at very briefly the requirements to be a CSCA, and we'll talk about the initial eligibility and then maintaining it. In order to be eligible to take the exam, as Lisa said, you need to have one of more than 60 other professional certifications. So CPA, ACCA, SEMA, the Indian Chartered Accountant, and there's a link here that has all of those certifications that are currently eligible to take CSCA. If you have a certification that you don't see on that list, ask IMA, send them an email and say, hey, what about this certification? It may be that it's they've added it, but it's not on the list yet, or it's something that can be looked at. But with over 60 certifications and a lot of the popular international certifications, there's a broad base of qualifying certifications. Once you pass CSCA, you need to maintain your IMA membership and you need to do your continuing education as a member of IMA. If you are here not as a CMA, but one of the other certifications that qualifies you for the exam, I want to say that IMA's membership has value by itself. Even if you're not a CMA, even if you're not a CSCA, the membership that comes from an active professional organization like IMA is a tremendous investment as well. And so whether it was CMA or CSCA as your first introduction to IMA, I like to say that that exam may be your introduction to IMA, but it is certainly not the end of your relationship with IMA. After you've passed CMA, after you've passed CSCA, maintain that membership. This is an active professional organization around the world. There's a chapter most likely near you that you are able to participate in, that you're able to network with. And it's this membership in IMA and being active in IMA that provides you the opportunity to find your next job and your best job. People in IMA are looking for talented people in their organizations. And so it's a very good group to network with. It's a very good group of people to be connected to and associated with as you go forward after passing CSCA. Something else that Lisa mentioned about a person who's involved in a nonprofit and a charitable organization. One of the things that people need in your career as you grow is to demonstrate that you have leadership skills, to demonstrate that you've been in leadership positions. And when you're early in your career and at the lower level of an organization, it's very hard to find that. It's very hard within your organization to say, well, I'm the accounts payable clerk and I have great leadership. Nobody reports to you. You don't have any leadership. Be involved in IMA. The leadership in a local chapter, that's a leadership position. And so being involved in IMA, being involved in the local chapter, the regional chapter internationally, this is also an opportunity not only to network, but also to build those leadership skills and to be involved in some of that strategic thinking that needs to take place as you go up the ladder and you start applying for more senior positions. Okay, so that's eligibility. If you're here, presumably you have one of those certifications. Let's talk about what the exam is. It's one exam. It is 3 hours. There are 60 multiple choice questions and one case study. And the exam is available in March and September. And so the question was, can you be ready in March? Yes, you can. And I know that it's only 2 months. But you need to keep in mind that when we look at the syllabus, you've already studied some of it as part of that first professional certification that you're using as your eligibility for CSCA. And you already have some of that you've learned. Like Lisa said, you've attended other webinars, you've attended courses, you've read books, you've done this, you've been involved with some of this. And what CSCA is doing is kind of putting all of that into a formalized structure for you, taking all of those different pieces that you've learned and picked up from different sources over the years and putting it into one tangible, coherent structure related to strategy and competitive analysis. So it's something that's very realistic to be able to do in a couple of months. There are 3 sections to the exam. Strategic analysis is 25% of the exam. Creating competitive advantage is 40% of the exam. Strategy implementation and performance is 35% of the exam. And if I were to go through, and I'm not going to, but if I were to go through and read through the learning outcome statements for you, a lot of this would already be familiar. There's SWOT analysis, there's Porter's 5 forces, there's risk management, there's enterprise risk management, there's balanced scorecard, there's performance measurement. And so it's a lot of things that we've maybe studied not from a strategic level, but putting all of those pieces together into that strategic framework, that competitive analysis framework that's going to enable you to utilize more successfully a lot of those little pieces of information that you've picked up through different readings and attendance at various events and things like that. 60 multiple choice questions and one case study, and you have 3 hours, and you can go back and forth between them. When I took CSCA, I'm a very quick multiple choice question taker, and so I had plenty of time to read the case study and do the case study. So if you want to spend 1 hour on the multiple choice questions and 2 hours on the case study, you can do that. If you're the opposite of me and you go slowly on the MCQs and very quickly on the case study, you can spend 1.5 hours on the MCQs and 1.5 hours on the case study, whatever it is that you want to do. But let me talk for a moment about how complicated, what are the case studies and how complicated are the case studies? And I will start by saying that the case studies that I've seen, that I practiced with, the one that I had on my exam, were very good. They were practical, they were actual, and there was enough information included in the case that it wasn't obvious. I know sometimes you see a case study somewhere and they ask you, well, what should we do? Well, based on the information they give you, there's only one thing you can do. That's not the case here. In these case studies, there is content that has to be analyzed. There's numbers that have to be analyzed. It's not a huge calculator exercise in terms of crunching all of the numbers to see what the profit is going to be or something like that. But it's taking all of those tools that you've learned and putting it into a case study. And so on your case study, you're going to expect something like analyze the situation. And so you may choose to do a SWOT analysis. You may choose to do a Pestel analysis. You may choose to do VRIO, whatever is appropriate for the situation, but something that's going to look at this company situation as a whole, and you're going to analyze it. Then there's going to be some element most likely that asks, so what should we do? What's the recommendation? Should we expand? Should we sell? Should we divest? What are we trying to do here? What do we think is going to be the best way forward? What's the best way forward in the strategy for the organization? And then there's going to be probably some element about risk. Okay, that's a big thing. What are the risks the organization faces? What are the risks with the strategy that you are recommending? Okay, it's wonderful if your strategy works perfectly, but what are some of the things that might go wrong with your strategy? What are the things that we have to do to protect ourselves from that? And then there may be some element of, how do we measure all of this? How do we know if the strategy was successful? What's the mechanism? What are the metrics we're going to put into place at the end to determine whether or not we did the right thing, whether or not it's going the way we wanted it to go, whether or not it's going the way we expected it to go. And so what this case study is going to do is it's going to test you essentially start to finish. Analyze the situation, make a recommendation, understand what the risks are, and then after we implement it, how do we know whether it was successful or not? It's not impossible. It's challenging. The nice thing about a case study is there is no one specific answer that's correct. And so when you write, this is what I recommend, this is the strategy I recommend, this is the risks that I have, you may come up with something that's a little bit different than other people who've taken the exam come up with. But that doesn't mean it's wrong. What's your reasoning? What's the rationale behind why you think this is the strategy? Why do you see this as an opportunity instead of what other people may see it as a threat? So you have the opportunity in the case study to explain your answer. It's not you write down 3 words and hope those are the right 3 words. You can explain it. You can support it. You can give that rationale behind the answer that you've come up with. And so the case study, though it's big, is your opportunity to demonstrate that you understand strategy and competitive analysis and how to put that into a strategy for a company. So it's your opportunity to do well rather than an opportunity for there to be problems for you. So the case study, big part of it, the mock exam or the MCQs, the multiple choice questions. So what is the passing score and what is the pass rate? Well, the CSCA is a scaled score and it's between 0 and 400 and the passing score is 280. And this is my letter from IMA saying that I passed CSCA a little less than a year ago is when I took it. I blocked out my scaled score just because no reason for anybody to know whether I barely passed or got a perfect score. We'll let that be a mystery for everybody to think about. But your score, the scaled score that's passing is 280. There's not a specific percentage correct that this relates to. As we know, when you get 60 questions out of a database of questions, some are more difficult than others. And so those 60 questions you get might be a little bit easier, might be a little bit more difficult than on average. And all of that goes into taking your scaled score. However, what I would say, and this is me, this is not IMA, if you're getting 75% of the MCQs correct, you're probably also going to get at least 75% of the case study correct. And I know that maybe there is scientific proof of this or lack of proof for this, but if we think about the fact that the case study covers strategy start to finish in a sense, and the multiple choice questions cover strategy start to finish, if you go through the multiple choice questions and you only get 25% of the multiple choice questions correct, there's no reason to expect that you're going to understand the case study and be able to write a good answer to the case study. If you get most of the multiple choice questions, if you get 85% of the multiple choice questions correct, clearly you understand strategy. Clearly you understand the SWOT analysis and PESTEL and risk management and all of those things. And so you're going to be able to answer the case study correctly. So have in mind 75, 80% of the MCQs, that's your target. And that's going to put you in position to have that foundation to be able to answer the case study as well. What is the pass rate? What percentage of people pass the exam? This number is not available. This isn't a published number. The general response is that the pass rate is pretty high. And that's because everybody who's taking CSCA has already passed a professional certification exam. And so when you go to CMA, you go to SEMA, you go to ACCA, you go to any first professional exam, the pass rate is brought down by people who never complete the exam. The person who goes into Part 1 CMA and gets a 22% and never shows up again, they're bringing down the pass rate for CMA. But when we're looking at CSCA, everybody who's taken CSCA has already passed the professional certification exam. So we have a very self-selected group. The population is a very high-level population that's going into CSCA. So the question coming back, is this something that can be done in 2 months? Absolutely. This is something that as you start reading through the book, you're going to say, oh yeah, this is actually, I remember this from the certification exam you took, from other places you've read, other readings you've done. It's going to start falling into place fairly quickly. And so with that, I am going to, I think, pass the microphone back to Jim to introduce our next speaker briefly, and I'll be back a little bit later.
Great. Thank you very much, Brian. We appreciate that information. Today we have another wonderful special guest, Nina Michaels Kim, another former colleague of mine. Nina and I worked together for more than 10 years at IMA and really enjoyed our time together. So Nina is going to take a little time today. She passed both the CMA and the CSCA exam and talk to you a little bit about how the CSCA can help you in the real world. Nina is a very successful entrepreneur and has started her own business many years ago. I think using both the CMA and her knowledge from the CSCA has really helped her. So it's my pleasure to welcome a good friend of mine to speak with you today, Nina Michaels Kim. So thank you, Nina.
Thank you, Jim. Does everybody hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Yes, so as Jim mentioned, I'm Nina and I have a CMA and CSCA, and I have my own company. I started it about 2010, so yeah, it's been a while now. But basically, what I do is coach, train, and advise people and act as a consultant to many companies and teams. And my mission, as it says on my slide right there, is to help finance people become strategic business partners. And if you would like to learn a little bit more about that, please click on the QR code actually, and you can check out my website and you could book a free introductory call for 15 to 20 minutes with me, where you can ask me any questions about my career or about the CMA CSCA. Yeah, take advantage of that opportunity. And you know, it's not such a simple decision because it involves time, the investment, but that Brian mentioned, and commitment, of course. But I was very fortunate that I was also in the first introductory inaugural 2017 CSCA course. Took the exam together with Lisa and Jeff Thompson, former CEO and president of IMA. And you know, it was challenging, but as I mentioned, I tried to answer some of the questions that came up in the Q&A, but it is manageable. That you need, it's only one exam, and as Brian also mentioned, you would already have the knowledge of the CMA, or whatever qualifications that you have. So I believe that it is something that is practical and gives you the strategic advantage that none of the other college qualifications have. So any more that you want me to, I actually also wrote down about how it benefits me. Should I do that now? It's now a
Yeah,
good
that'd be
time.
great.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the first things that I had to do as a consultant, in one of my earlier engagements, when I started my company, is to make an environmental scan. And one of the things that you would learn through this program, the CSCA studies, is how to do that. And I think that is so valuable. And you know, I only I had to do it without that knowledge, and I wish I had that when I had to do that engagement right earlier in my company, because I got the CSCA later. But then I was like, wow, now if somebody asks me that, I know how to do it. So this is one of the benefits of participating in the CSCA program. And another thing is what I'm also with my son right now, who's applying right now. He's trying to follow in my footsteps and also become a consultant. He's getting a lot of interviews with consulting companies, but he needs to also solve cases and also do job assessments, interviews, and there's like a real life case. For many of you who may be working at the big four, et cetera, you may have done this. And I believe that this CSCA material will also help you even in the earlier stages, when you're interviewing for like to become the first consulting associate. And the other thing is then, of course, as Lisa mentioned, as a capstone program, I know so many CMAs, CFOs who are now CEOs. So many that I could count. They have that strategic mindset. They had to participate once they were at a senior level in business related decisions. And it's definitely the CSCA that will give you the edge to make sure that you can also be answering such strategic questions. Another thing I did to prepare myself, you stop me if I'm talking too much, but you know, I've taken a look at some of the job descriptions that are online right now for, you know, associate director, financial planning and analysis, or head of finance in a country. These all require strategic insight from the candidate or whoever assumes this position. You know, you will support the general manager and local management team to build strategies for the company, evaluate, support the development of the annual strategic plan. So again, you know, the strategy is so important for you to successfully do this role. Also with the FP&A is to set up the business KPIs, key performance indicators. And this is another thing that you will learn much more in the CSCA module. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, Nina, I think you already answered this question a little bit, but I see it in the Q&A, so I'll pose it to you. It says, can we apply for strategic consulting roles after completing the CSCA?
Why not? Yeah, yeah. I mean, what is the criteria of the, you know, it depends on whatever that position is, that specific position, because I don't know about that role. I've only looked at these roles, you know, like the finance one, coming from my financial background. But, you know, really, as Brian mentioned, entrepreneur, or Lisa, there's people who have or you know, non-financial background that would definitely benefit from this. Everyone also calls the CMA like a mini MBA, right? And with that, to have the CSCA, the strategy, with both of those, I think you can definitely apply for that kind of position. And if what Brian says, that he can't find any other certification that has the name strategy in front of it, then yeah, I would take that CSCA and run with it when you're applying for that job.
Great. Thank you so much for your time, Nina. We'll ask you to stay on in case there's some other questions that people have for you at the end. But we definitely appreciate your real world experience in using both your CMA and your CSCA, and appreciate your offer to help out people that may have some questions or need some consulting. So thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate it.
No problem. It's a pleasure. Thank you, everybody.
Great. Thanks, Nina. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Brian, who will talk a little bit about the study materials that are available from Hock and how they can help you pass the exam.
Thank you, Nina, for sharing that. I know it's something always to hear from somebody who's actually done it and benefited from a certification. I see in the Q&A, there's some questions about the study materials, and so now is a perfectly good time to answer them. We have everything you need to pass the exam. The content that we have is specifically built off of the CSCA learning outcome statements. And just like FMAA and CMA, the IMA has done a fantastic job creating the learning outcome statements for CSCA, which tells us exactly what you need to know and also therefore what you don't need to know. And so we've gone through the LOS, we've gone through the content to make certain that it lines up perfectly. We have a textbook, we have a test bank, mock exam, case studies, and a study system that will help you go through all of that content. There was a question about how many MCQs and how many case studies. We have over 400 MCQs right now, and that's a number that will continue to grow slowly over time as we add more. We also will have 7 case studies to practice with. And so after you've done those 7 case studies, you'll be prepared for whatever case study it is that you get on the exam. And so that's something that will certainly prepare you for that part of it. And yes, you don't need any other materials other than what we have available to prepare to pass the exam. And again, I want you to keep in mind that some of this content, you know, And I'm not sure I should say that, but that's the reality of it. When you start reading through and we start talking about a SWOT analysis, okay, you've studied a SWOT analysis somewhere. You've heard about it. It was on the certification that you took to be eligible for CSCA, whatever the case is. You've looked at Porter's 5 forces. You've talked about risk management. You've studied balanced scorecard, or some of these, if not all of these topics, somewhere else. And so a lot of what's happening in CSCA is it's taking all of that information and putting it into a structure, putting it into a way that you're able to describe it. You're able to use it a lot more perhaps than you were able to before, when you just had all these different pieces of strategic information that you'd cobbled together from different sources. I personally enjoyed studying for this because I learned a lot of new things as well, new tools that I wasn't familiar with as I was before. I particularly like VRIO analysis, and I've done presentations based off of using VRIO analysis in your careers, and not just from a strategic standpoint for a company. So there's a lot of application of these things outside of just strategic planning for a company. One of the questions was also about promotional pricing for the September exam. We don't know what the promotional pricing will be for the September exam. We do know, though, that if you pay now and you don't take the exam in March, you can use that exam registration in September. And so if you know you're going to take it in September, but you don't know that you're going to take it in March, and you want to make that investment, absolutely, you can do that. And you can use that exam registration once, either in March or in September. And clearly there's more time to prepare before September. It's very possible that you're in a situation where you've got busy season, year end, or something is going on, and it's just not a good time for you right now to make that commitment to the studying. But if you want to take advantage of the promotional pricing now, you can do that. The system that we have for studying, if you've studied CMA with us, you're already familiar with it. It's a pass map where it goes through all the different study units where the textbook and the MCQs are connected together. Well, the question is, how many hours should you study? It's going to be different for everybody based on what you know coming into this. I would have in mind 50 hours as a starting point. But if you go quickly through the SWOT analysis, then it's going to come a little bit less. If it's something you haven't looked at in a while and you spend more time on it, but 50 hours is the number that I would have in mind, just as a starting point. It may be that when you get started, you say, wow, 20 hours is going to be enough. I would recommend that no matter how well you know the content, you do the practice MCQs, because there's a difference between SWOT analysis and theory and SWOT analysis practice questions. And so you want to go through those practice questions just to be able to make certain that you kind of understand the testing structure the way that this has been asked previously. So when you subscribe for our materials, you get a 3-day free trial. And I know that somebody signed up right now during this event, and so somebody may have already stopped listening and is starting to look at the content already, which is fine. You get 3 days to decide if it's what you want, if it's what you need. So take advantage of that. Sign up when you have a couple of days where you're going to be able to spend a little bit of time going through it and making certain that it's what you need. There was a question that was asked when the videos are going to be coming. As much as I would like to say that those videos will be available for March, that's not going to happen. I would expect that the videos will be available sometime this summer. Having said that, though, the only reason that you would want videos really is if you don't want to read a book and you just want to listen instead of read, which is perfectly understandable and a good reason, but there aren't calculations. There aren't formulas like there are on some other exams. And so this is something where I think for most candidates, since you already have some familiarity with this, you're able to go through the textbook and pick up what you need just from reading the textbook. If you have questions, ask us. We've got the forum for CSCA all set up, and we're getting questions in there. But you have all of the tools. But I would expect that the videos will be available for the September exam window and not the March exam window. We also, just as a reminder, in the chat section, there are some links that we've given links to different sites and documents that you might find useful for all of this. And so that is what I wanted to say in terms of all of the slides. And so we have time for a Q&A, and I have a couple of links here. One is to our website, which I think that link is already in the chat. The other link is for the FAQs that are on IMA's website about CSCA. Excellent information there, a lot of information there. There's also the CSCA candidate handbook that you can download from IMA's website. Also, a lot of great information there in terms of the process, the registration, and things like that. And so thank you very much for your attention and your time so far. That's the end of the prepared remarks. And so what I will do is I will turn this back to Jim for any questions that you have. Put them in the Q&A, and any that we haven't answered, we will answer them. Thank you very much, everyone.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Definitely appreciate your time to answer those questions and kind of go through the content of the exam. There's some questions that I have for you that have already been asked and others that are new, and so we'll go through those. Just a reminder to everybody, you can type your questions in the Q&A, and either we will answer them live, or we'll try to type you an answer, or we'll direct you to a place where you can find them. Most of the information that you have is available either on Hock's website, under the CSCA portion, on IMA's website, or in the handbook that you get from IMA as well. And so we'll direct you to a lot of those resources to be able to find the information. But since we're here live, we're happy to answer those questions that you have as well. So Brian, let's start out with one that's a little bit different. How well do you think that the CSCA complements data analytics certification? Specifically, I think the one from IMA, but does studying strategy and competitive analysis go along with data analytics?
I think it does, partially or mostly because in order for the data to be useful, it actually has to be actioned on somehow. It's not just a matter of companies collect all of this data and keep it. It's a matter of utilizing that data and using that data to make decisions of going forward for the company. And so as I would look at it just at first glance, if you're in data analytics, part of the success of that career is to be able to use the data. And the more you understand what the data is going to be used for, or what the person who's asking for this data is doing with it, you're going to be able to provide better data to them. You're going to be able to help them get what they need. And this is completely a non-technical or non-IT related. I remember when I was an audit intern, and I went to the client and I asked, can I get this schedule from you? And the client said, what are you trying to test? And I said, I'm looking for this. And they said, well, that's what we thought. After last year's audit, we made an entirely new schedule just for you so that it'll have all the information you need in it. Well, and that's kind of what, if you understand what the information you're analyzing is being used for, you're able to provide a much better data set to that person than if you didn't know what it was being used for. And so I believe that CSCA would really complement just about any position within a company, because it helps you understand what the company is ultimately trying to do.
Great. Thank you very much. There's a few questions about registration. One is the exam throughout March, or is it on a specific day? And how do you register for actually sitting for the exam?
Okay. The exam window is March. So March 1 to March 31. The only days that wouldn't be available in that is if the test center is closed, whether it's closed for a weekend or a holiday in whatever country the test center is located in. And so it's really March 1st to March 31st. The registration process, there's a question also about whether or not you have to be subscribing to Hock in order to get the promotional pricing. The answer to that is yes. The promotional pricing is available for candidates who have the Hock subscription. What will happen in that case is you will pay the money to Hock. We will transfer your registration information to IMA, and they will then send you the registration information that you need to contact Prometric to schedule your exam. For those who have already studied or already have materials or don't want to study, but you want to take advantage of the discount on the promotional pricing, well, simple math tells you it's cheaper to subscribe for a month and get the promotional pricing than not subscribe for a month and pay IMA's price. So that's just, it's set up that the promotional pricing is available for candidates who have the Hock CSCA materials.
Yeah,
There was
Brian,
also a question, how many attempts do you get? You can take the exam once per window. So if you take it on March 1st and fail, you have to wait until September to take it. And then as long as you have the money to pay for the registration and the desire to keep going, it's unlimited as to how many attempts you can take, but hopefully no more than 2 will be required.
back to the previous question, Brian, about the learning materials from IMA that people may have purchased. Could you explain the difference between Hock's study materials and the IMA learning series that they have available for the CSCA?
Right. Our CSCA materials were designed off of the CSCA learning outcome statements. IMA's learning series on strategy is an excellent learning series. It just isn't designed specifically for and from the CSCA learning outcome statements. And so as you go through that IMA system, it won't match up to Section A, Topic 1, Section B, Topic 1, like that. Most of the content on the exam is in the learning series, and most of the content in the learning series is on the exam, but the learning series was not developed specifically to be study materials for the CSCA exam. Our materials have been. And so if it's on the CSCA exam, it's in our materials. If it's in our materials, it's on the CSCA exam.
Great, thank you. There's a question about, can I get CFE credits from CMA upon subscribing to the Hock study materials?
I'm assuming that this was supposed to be CPE credits.
Yeah,
No, the Hock, another difference between Hock and the IMA learning series is if you go through the IMA learning series, you are able to get 21 continuing education hours from going through that learning series. The learning series, as I said, is not specifically to CSCA. It is actually a learning course, which has been registered for continuing education. Our course has not been registered for continuing education. And so studying CSCA with Hock will not get you continuing education. However, if you pass the CSCA exam, you get 30 hours of continuing education with IMA. And so if you're a CMA and you then take CSCA and pass, you get 30 hours towards your continuing education as an IMA member. You can't take that to another professional organization, but with an IMA, you will get 30 hours of credit for that.
great. So a question here, do we have WhatsApp groups? They would be helpful for group discussions. And maybe you could talk a little bit about the forum, the internal things that are available as people prepare if they purchase Hock materials.
We don't have a WhatsApp group, but we do have a forum that people use to ask questions and we respond to them. And if there's a group that wants to talk about something, there's that opportunity exists as well. Anybody's able to contribute to that conversation on the forum. But we don't have a WhatsApp group. I was trying to think of something more articulate than that, but we don't have a WhatsApp group. It may be something that we implement in the future, but right now it is something that we do not have.
Great. Another question here. Do people need to pay for the Hock 3-day free trial?
No, you don't, but you do need to enter your credit card information. And so what happens is you go to our website, you click on the subscribe, whatever the button says, you enter your credit card information and your card is not charged. In 3 days, your card will be charged. But if you cancel within that 3 days, your card will not be charged. And so I know what some people do is they sign up and then they cancel immediately. You continue to have access for those 3 days. And then if you decide you like it, you can go back in and turn on your subscription again or uncancel it. And then you'll be charged in 3 days and you will then be able to continue accessing the materials. After your first payment, a couple of days after that, you will have the option will come for you to pay for your CSCA exam registration. So if you sign up for the free trial, you don't get access to pay for the registration and take advantage of the promotional pricing. But after you make your first payment, then you do have that option to do that.
Okay, great. So we've answered the questions so far that have been in the Q&A. So this is kind of the last call. If anybody else has a question that maybe we haven't answered or we didn't directly answer in a way that helped you, feel free to type that in. Along those same lines, Brian, I just wanted to say thank you for your time today. We really appreciate all of the input and advice that people have getting ready for the CSCA. If there are no other questions, then I just want to say thank you also to Lisa and Nina for joining us and sharing their insight. Again, this recording will be sent to everybody who participated in the webinar today, and it will have the links to the different resources that we mentioned. This is a great certification. It's fairly new to IMA and to the finance world, so please take some time to check it out. And Brian, I'll let you close with any last words that you might have.
Again, thank you everyone for coming. I hope you've had your questions answered, whether that confirms a decision to or not to do CSCA. Either way, we've achieved our goal. I know that there's a couple of people I see have their hands up. If you have a question that we haven't answered, you can send it to us by email, just support@hockinternational.com, and we'll be happy to answer whatever questions you have. Or if as soon as this is over, you have a question that comes to mind 10 seconds later, send us an email and we will absolutely answer whatever questions it is that you have. If you decide to do CSCA, this is a tremendous investment. It's financially not a large investment. Time-wise, it's also not a huge investment. But as I said at the beginning, because this focuses on strategy, because this is about strategic and competitive analysis and putting all of those different tools and buzzwords that you've heard in so many different places and so many different ways over your career, it puts it into a structure, it puts it into a language and kind of that framework that you can use to help whatever organization you're involved with, whether it's a job, whether there's a volunteer organization you're part of, whatever the case may be. It's a tremendous certification. It's a great knowledge to have. It will benefit you the rest of your career. And if you decide to do CSCA, we look forward to being able to help you pass your exam, whether it's in March or September. And this is something that will benefit you for the rest of your career.
Great. All right. One last question I see here before we go. In exam registration, we aren't asking for the membership or the proof that they have this previous certification. Will that affect the information that's sent from IMA?
No, what will happen is we're collecting the information IMA needs from us. We aren't the ones that are verifying whether or not you have a different certification. And so that would come from IMA. Any confirmation that they want to get from you about your certification will come from IMA. But essentially what's happening through our promotional pricing is just that mechanism of collecting your initial information and making the payment is done through Hock instead of through IMA. But once that's done, the process will be completely the same, and that everything will come directly from IMA to you, connected to your ongoing registration.
Great, thank you. The last thing I'll say is that this is great. The subscription model is wonderful for anybody who wants to study on their own. We also have an opportunity available if you run a class or training provider or are interested in teaching this material to other people. Please reach out to me or Hock directly, and we can talk to you about setting up your own course to teach other people. CSCA will also be taught in some live class options through some of our learning providers, and you can check our website for places that do that. But if you're interested in that or a live study session, please let us know that as well, and we'll try to connect you to the right places. With that, I will close our webinar for today. Thank you all for attending. It was a great session, and we appreciate your time. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you.